little dead mouse. There is no room in this story to tell you of all the games they had. I can only say that the time went by so quickly that they never noticed it going, and were amazed when the Crown nursemaid brought in the royal tea tray. Tea was a beautiful meal, with pink iced cake in it. Now all the time that these glorious games had been going on, and this magnificent tea, the wisest crows of Crownowland had been holding a council. They had decided that there was no time like the present, and that Elsie had better try to tame the dragon soon as late. 'But,' the King said, 'she mustn't run any risks. A guard of 50 stalwart crows must go with her, and if the dragon shows the least temper, 50 crows must throw themselves between her and danger, even if it cost 51 crow lives. For I myself will lead that band. Who will volunteer?' Volunteers to the number of some thousands instantly stepped forward, and the Field Marshal selected 50 of the strongest crows. And then, in the pleasant pinkness of the sunset, Elsie was led out on to the palace steps, where the King made a speech and said what a heroine she was, and how like Joan of Arc. And the crows who had gathered from all parts of the town cheered madly. Did you ever hear crows cheering? It is a wonderful sound. Then Elsie got into a magnificent gilt coach drawn by 8 white horses, with a crow at the head of each horse. The Princess sat with her on the blue velvet cushions and held her hand. 'I know you'll do it,' said she. 'You're so brave and clever, Elsie.' And Elsie felt braver than before, although now it did not seem so like a dream. But she thought of the martyrs and held Perdona's hand very tight. At the gates of the Green Park the Princess kissed and hugged her new friend. Her state crown, which she had put on in honour of the occasion, got pushed quite on one side in the warmth of her embrace, and Elsie stepped out of the carriage. There was a great crowd of crows round the park gates, and every one cheered and shouted, 'Speech! Speech!' Elsie got as far as 'Ladies and gentlemen, crows I mean,' and then she could not think of anything more, so she simply added, 'Please, I'm ready.' I wish you could have heard those crows cheer. But Elsie wouldn't have the escort. 'It's very kind,' she said, 'but the dragon only eats crows, and I'm not a crow, thank goodness. I mean, I'm not a crow. And if I've got to be brave, I'd like to be brave, and none of you to get eaten. If only some one will come with me to show me the way, and then run back as hard as he can when we get near the dragon. Please.' 'If only one goes, I shall be the one,' said the King. And he and Elsie went through the great gates side by side. She held the end of his wing, which was the nearest they could get to hand in hand. The crowd outside waited in breathless silence. Elsie and the King went on through the winding paths of the People's Park. And by the winding paths they came at last to the dragon. He lay very peacefully on a great stone slab, his enormous bat-like wings spread out on the grass, and his goldy green scales glittering in the pretty pink sunset light. 'Go back,' said Elsie. 'No,' said the King. 'If you don't,' said Elsie, 'I won't go on. Seeing a crow might rouse him to fury, or give him an appetite, or something. Do go.' So he went, but not far. He hid behind a tree, and from its shelter he watched. Elsie drew a long breath. Her heart was thumping under the black frock. Suppose, she thought, he takes me for a crow. But she thought how yellow her hair was, and decided that the dragon would be certain to notice that. "Quick march," she said to herself, "remember Joan of Arc," and walked right up to the dragon. It never moved, but watched her suspiciously out of its bright green eyes. "Dragon dear," she said in her clear little voice. "Eh?" said the dragon, in tones of extreme astonishment. "Dragon dear," she repeated, "do you like sugar?" "Yes," said the dragon. "Well, I've brought you some. You won't hurt me if I bring it to you?" The dragon violently shook its vast head. "It's not much," said Elsie, "but I saved it at tea time, 4 lumps, 2 for each of my mugs of milk." She laid the sugar on the stone slab by the dragon's paw. It turned its head towards the sugar. The pinky sunset light fell on its face, and Elsie saw that it was weeping. Great fat tears as big as prize pears were coursing down its wrinkled cheeks. "Oh, don't," said Elsie, "don't cry. Poor dragon, what's the matter?" "Oh," sobbed the dragon, "I'm only so glad you've come. I've been so lonely. No one to love me. You do love me, don't you?" "I'm sure I shall when I know you better," said Elsie kindly. "Give me a kiss, dear," said the dragon, sniffing. It is no joke to kiss a dragon, but Elsie did it, somewhere on the hard green wrinkles of its forehead. "Oh, thank you," said the dragon, brushing away its tears with the tip of its tail. "That breaks the charm. I can move now, and I've got back all my lost wisdom. Come along, I do want my tea." So to the waiting crowd at the gate came Elsie and the dragon side by side. And at the sight of the dragon, tamed, a great shout went up from the crowd. And at that shout each one in the crowd turned quickly to the next one, for it was the shout of men and not of crows, because at the first sight of the dragon tamed they had left off being crows for ever and ever, and once again were men. The king came running through the gates, his royal robes held high, so that he shouldn't trip over them, and he too was no longer a crow, but a man. And what did Elsie feel after being so brave? Well, she felt that she would like to cry and also to laugh, and she felt that she loved not only the dragon, but every man, woman and child in the whole world, even Mrs. Staines. She rode back to the palace on the dragon's back. And as they went, the crowd of citizens who had been crows met the crowd of citizens who had been pigeons, and these were poor men in poor clothes. It would have done you good to see how the ones who had been rich and crows ran to meet the ones who had been pigeons and poor. "Come and stay at my house, brother," they cried to those who had no homes. "Brother, I have many coats, come and choose some," they cried to the ragged. "Come and feast with me," they cried to all. And the rich and the poor went off arm in arm to feast and be glad that night, and the next day to work side by side. "For," said the king, speaking with his hand on the neck of the tamed dragon, "our land has been called